everyone. My name is Dr. Kramer. Welcome to our session 3 of Enhancing Experience Through Emotional Responsiveness. My name is Dr. Kramer. I am a graduate professor for the FinTech program. Didn't realize I'm like in the dark, so let me have some light in here so you can see me a little better. So I want to say thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at in the world today. So in today's session, we're going to be talking about psychologically impact of intelligent artificial general intelligence. So we're going to define what is emotional intelligence and how it relates to artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is basically algorithms that we can streamline. And is everyone able to hear me? Because I'm calling in on my phone. So if we happen to disconnect as an FYI, I will call right back. So my apologies there. So thank you for everyone keeping mute because I will make it a little easier so we don't have that audio feedback. So back to our session. When we define emotional intelligence, it's how we empathize and how we feel as human beings. In this presentation, we're going to talk about how artificial general intelligence is going to change the pivotal point of how we streamline, how we deal with chat box, facial recognition. When you probably go to a banking institution, you probably see Erica, and you feel like that's some kind of a human entity, but it's a chat situation. So we have to really define what is emotionally intelligent AI. It's a system that can recognize and understand our response by human emotions. It's not going to feel like we feel, but it can look at our cues to see if we're nervous, anxious, etc., so forth. And it would be like an assistant or a tool for us and how we can make things more streamlined. And when we're talking about artificial intelligence capable of recognizing, like I mentioned a moment ago, it can use facial recognition or voice tone analysis. It can do natural language processing. There could be some examples like a virtual assistant, like in a mental health support. You probably are familiar with the Soul Machine. Soul Machines is founded in Auckland, New Zealand, where there are people that have created these digital people, and they're used for specific locations. One is where, as you hear in the background, that is one of my virtual assistant's dogs. So we're actually doing machine learning. So if you hear that in the background, you're thinking, is that a real dog? No, that's actually with me working in some research. So if you hear that, I do apologize. There's no way I can mute it in the back. They're working on that algorithm. So I do apologize for that. So now you can see how that helps support when they hear a dog bark. Some people would feel fearful. Some would not. That could make a lot of people uncomfortable. So these can be used as a form of emotional intelligence. And we want to have these AI entities to help us to make things, to help us to relieve that stress. So sometimes when someone hears a dog barking, some people might feel anxious because they are fearful of dogs. There are some people that when they don't or love dogs, when they hear a dog barking, it kind of comforts them. So that's where you probably see these digital dogs, where we have in Boston Dynamics, they create these dogs to guard the premises without actually having an actual dog to get injured or hurt, where they can go into those other areas. And it can also sense if a person is anxious, et cetera, and so forth. And this also helps us to feel more secure. If I sounded like, hello, my name is Dr. Kramer, you'll think I'm a digital person, but in reality, I am a real person. But we can actually create someone that looks like you, which Soul Machines actually, if you go to soulmachines.com, you can actually have a digital person to look like you and can be your assistant to help you when you're dealing with advising or whatever realm you're in. If you're in psychology, you have that empathy point to a certain extent. When we're dealing with emotional responses and user experiences, we have to have that adaptive response of the mood and the tone. So if someone says hello angrily, the AI entity could treat that and answer back hostily. Or a person may have a more harsher tone and AI might misinterpret it So we have to be careful when we are designing these types of emotional intelligence entities, especially when we're dealing with natural language processing and how we deal with how we train it. It's just like how we train a person when a child is born. It's born with feelings and etc. What makes us human. And when we deal with these types of devices, that give me 1 second. I'm just going to tell my AI entities to kind of stop the dog barking because I know that that can be very distracting. Hold on. I do apologize for the distraction. So back to where we were, we talk about improved personalization and relevance. So we have to have AI adjusting the tone during the customer service, providing comfort during distressful times. So let's say, for example, a person in an area like in California, the wildfires, that was a major destruction. So we need some of these artificial intelligence entities to kind of have that empathy, even though it cannot feel like we have, but it will provide these capabilities to help them when they're going through times of how do they rebuild their lives. So these AI tools can help them to get the insurance that they need or adjustment or whatever they need in a timely, efficient manner when they're going through a very stressful time. When we deal with the adaptive artificial intelligence behavior, we have to learn from user feedback and emotional cues. It's just like a baby. The baby watches the parents, and when we say thank you by giving the food, it's sort of like the pava. When you ring the bell, it comes back. So it's the same thing when we're training these artificial intelligence entities. And we can use these real time and tones and different interaction styles. So when we go back to the Soul Machines is basically dealing with digital people. Behind the scenes, they have what is called the digital brain. You probably are seeing or familiar with the neural networks that we see that help people that are not able to speak or not able to move. So these neural links are an AI entity that goes into the body to be able for the person to be able to walk because it's energy and the neural processes of how it makes it work. Excuse me, everyone. Then we deal with the language. So say, for example, if a person is speaking another language, a different barrier, let's say someone is from Southeast Asia, and their tone is going to be a little different. So we have to train these artificial intelligence entities to be adaptable in different various fields. And with this AI background, with the digital brain, it has the ability to process like we can process. But of course, keep in mind, when it hears our voices, it can be a little empathetic to make us feel comfortable with it. But of course, it's not going to feel like we feel because it is an entity to help us to be more creative. A lot of people are very fearful of these chatbots and artificial intelligence and digital people. You know, we have our smart homes. Smart homes, when you come in, you have your coffee ready for you. You might have a robot that cleans your home. And some people may feel uncomfortable, and a lot of people are fearful that maybe their jobs will be displaced. And that's far from it because we're definitely going to need humans for every factor of jobs. And we have to train these AI entities to be like our assistant. And there are some laws that they're trying to incorporate what considers a personhood. That's a whole different session that we'll probably cover in a later part. That's kind of outside the element. But this goes into the impact of this empathy part, how we hear, how we listen, active listening. And this is how we start training these neural networks and how this process comes to be. And we have these different algorithms to make things more streamlined and easier and find that tone of voice. There are some applications that are used for various sectors, like the healthcare for mental health. There are some chatbots and emotional support tools that can help us. In like Soul Machines, they have one to help for advising. How are you feeling today? And it would be a monologue back and forth. But of course, If you're dealing with major crisis, we'll definitely go to the psychiatrist or the psychologist, depending upon the severity of the person's emotional state. So this AI entity can listen very carefully and empathetically and could take that person that needs the help the most. In the educational realm, it can provide that personalized tutoring and that adapts to the student's emotions. So let's say, for example, you have a student that has lost a loved one. And so what type of tools, some students may want to continue to take their courses to help them to be distracted. Or they may wish to take some time. And so this AI entity can provide some strategies to help the student to adapt to that specific need during that crisis. Another example of a person may be dyslexic, and we might personalize their education and tutoring to help with that disability and to help the student to be able to go from point A to point B in their academia. So if they're in the undergraduate world, that the AI entity can adapt and can listen to their concerns. I love learning artificial intelligence, like the student can say, but I'm very weak in math, I'm very weak in some different skills. So the AI entity could create some entry-level math that can still help the student to be able to reach to the level of graduating from their bachelor's and master's and eventually their doctorates. And a lot of faculty members are very scared of that. Oh my gosh, my job is going to be obsolete. Far from it. These are some tools that can help us to be even better to help our students. These are tools to help us because it'll never replace a faculty. It will never replace that human empathy. To be able to feel when that person has lost a loved one, the AI can be good to help them to find ways to cope, but it would never understand that feeling connection, so there would always be that disconnect. And when we deal with the customer service part, the empathetic AI handles the complaints and queries. So let's say, for example, a person had a car that had a lot of malfunctioning, and it could be a hybrid car or it could be an EV car, and that car has a lot of problems with it. So on their car, it can say, well, you are having engine issues. We can report this complaint without this person have to be on the phone for hours and be routed from point A to point B to another entity. So that makes it more streamlined and easier for them to process that information, whereas in the past, they would have to go to different locations. And sometimes there could be a way that, say, for example, they have an EV car and it has a platform inside the car, and let's say they have an oil issue and it's not cranking, it's not working, it's not facilitating the way it needs. So it'll automatically take that complaint, goes to the service department, and maybe it can self-troubleshoot itself by maybe it needs some software updates. But if it's an engine problem or something else, it could call the tow truck, the car can be towed without the customer having to be so stressed out. And that entity can listen to by the tone of the voice of the customer, and that makes it a lot easier for companies as well as customer service representatives. Now, of course, there are going to be some challenges and ethical considerations when we're dealing with artificial intelligence. We have to deal with the privacy and the data sensitivity and misinterpretations of emotions. So emotional manipulation can also be a concern. So let's say, for example, we're having our meeting in real time. And let's say an AI entity is listening to us, and we end the meeting, and it shows on a deep fake that it makes some mistakes. That is not true. And that's the same thing as our leaders. We're not going to get into the politics of it, but I'm just giving some examples that are some ethical challenges that it can actually be harmful. So we have to make sure that we have the laws to protect us, to keep us from not being cyberbullied or misinterpreted for different tones of voice. Some of you might have heard of a robot called Amica. Amica has more of a rougher tone of voice, and some people can interpret that as being rude and hostile. So we have to go back and reprogram. Another part of misinterpretation of emotion. So say, for example, someone has their arms like folded up and they seem like they're agitated. So that AI entity could take it that the person is angry, and that could be a misinterpretation. It could be the person is bored, or the person could be cold. It could be either or. When we're dealing with emotional manipulation concerns, we can say, for example, an AI entity can see that someone is crying, and it could be a twofold. The first approach is that it can see that the person is in distress. One is that, oh, we can make you happy. Would you like me to buy flowers? Or that could be a form of manipulation, or it could be also a good gesture. So those fine lines of shades of gray, as they say, in the realms of the AI part. So we have to be very careful when we are in these labs creating these entities, that we want to make sure that the privacy and data sensitivity, especially in the medical field or any field for that matter, you want to make sure that if a person's at the hospital and a robot comes in, or it comes in through a computer interface, and you want to make sure that their HIPAA laws and everything is in compliance within the laws of this country. And also, if the patient is agitated, that the AI entity doesn't misinterpret that the person was mad, and in reality, they were just in pain. And also, we want to make sure that that AI entity does not manipulate that person emotionally, saying, well, you're just not feeling well. Well, maybe you just need to exercise more. That could be an off cue of the emotions, as well as a twofold approach. The future outlook for AI is that we have advancements in effective computing. We have what is called artificial general intelligence, which is of human intelligence. Then we have this super intelligence, which supersedes the human intelligence of the AGI entity. And that's something like Dr. Ben Grizel and Dr. Hiroshi Suguru and other Hanson Robotics. They are dealing with the advancements of computing every day. And they are very concerned to make sure that it is ethically compiled. And we also have Ray Kurzweil, which they talk about singularity, and also Dr. Ben Kurzweil deals with what's called singularity net. And this singularity is where they want to try to see if they can push over the edge of AGI, reaching to where it could have empathy. Is it a possibility? That's what we call the unknown variable. And that's where the graduate school, the research, maybe that could be your future hypotheses. Is it a possibility? Now, when we talk about the potential for emotional support systems, like I just said, now if we enter the quantum computing of it, where it supersedes all of the above, and what would that look like, and how would that help us as humans, as the humanity, from 5, 10, 15 years down the road? Will it displace jobs? Maybe in 1 percentile, but for the majority part, we're still going to have humans to fine tune when it goes rogue, meaning that it goes beyond the parameters, like if it misses the points of people's emotional intelligence, meaning that it's not calculating, not working the way we should do, like facial recognition. If you go to the TSA and you have these AI entities looking at the mood of the person, the facial, that could also cause a lot of issues for people who want to travel to point A to point B, that we make sure that these TSA parts of, if they use the AI component of the facial recognition or any other component, that it is compliant, and that we make sure that it's not tapped into, meaning hacks into it and can manipulate that data. So that's also a security issue that we also have to put in consideration, and that makes it much more intense. I'm going to take a brief pause. I know this is a lot of information. Does anyone have any questions? I'm not able to see the chat, so someone could be eyes for me. Does anyone have any questions for me?
I don't see any questions posted just yet.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. So when we're talking about the psychological impact of emotionally intelligent AGI on users, we have to do emotional validation. So we have to do some algorithms and different types of approach to make sure that this AI entity is valid. Like, say, for example, a person is in their living room and they had hip replacement surgery or they had a knee replacement surgery, and they have a digital person comes on to their laptop and say, we noticed that your flexing is not moving at a 90-degree angle for your particular age group. And I see that in your room, I see there's a rug that could be a potential trip hazard. Someone might need to come in to replace that. And I can see that you're feeling a little apprehensive by the way you're moving. So I'm giving an expansion of that. And that also helps to reduce that anxiety of that person. And it's doing that human bonding, it's doing that motivation, and it's providing that social support with that digital person that's helping that patient that's at home recovering from a knee replacement surgery. And also a person that could be dealing with hospice. We have to do that emotional validation that there's people in the room dealing with their loved ones. How do we help reduce that anxiety, and how do we provide that bonding when a person goes, the loved ones are watching the person, transition to the next part of their life, and how do people deal with the loss of that loved one once they watch their loved one go? How will this AI entity come to help? And also, how will it help other entities, and what are the disadvantages, if any? How is emotionally responsive AGI enhance the user experience? Well, it can help with the personalized interaction, that it can personalize and set it to your personal setting, what your likes, dislikes are. It will help with de-escalation issues. So say, for example, you and a loved one are having a disagreement. So the AI is actually listening, because we have our phones, and wherever we are, it can listen and say, oh, let's do a debuffer. Let's take a 5-minute break here. I see that there's some tension in the room. And then we can do that emotional feedback loop, that it's re-looping back to see that that same friction is going on. So it does that decision-making process to say, okay, in this room, I see these two maybe it could be a partner, it could be a person that's a boss, it could be an employee, and there's some friction. So the AI entity comes in and tries to debug by using open-ended questions and provides that excellent decision-making. That's one component. A second component could be that we can use it for HR, personalize it, that we want to make sure, let's say we want to work in a university. We have a university, say a chat or a virtual HR person. So we want to personalize that interaction, help with de-escalations when we're dealing with anything that, if it's in the part of the HIPAA, if people who are in the nursing department, is it compliant when they're working in the field versus in the academic setting? Do we have to do the emotional loop back to make sure that it is working properly, the dynamic decision-making, whatever it may be in the part of the university setting, how the HR digital person is set up to be? And then if it's a dean, it's the same concept, et cetera, so on and so forth. Now, there are some tools that AGI, we can help build these emotional intelligence, and that is Fictivia, OpenAI, GPT-based models, IBM Watson, Tone Analyzer. There's the Voice Beyond Verbal, Fundy Health, as well as Soul Machines, MIT Media Lab tools. They deal with a lot of different types of AI, enhancing robotics, and Dr. Ben Gerswell, which you probably heard of Sophia. Sophia became the first personhood in Saudi Arabia back in 2017. So they used a lot of these tools to help build some of these, like Amica. Let's see, I'm trying to think of another one, Jules, which is located in England. And then there's Replica Artificial Intelligence, and of course, Microsoft, how they build these emotional intelligence. Now, these are some hypotheses that are the most difficult aspects of artificial general intelligence to master: emotional intelligence. So I know some people that are probably in graduate school, and how you could think about how you could use it in the undergrad. So the first hypothesis could be is artificial general intelligence will struggle accurately to interpret complex, culturally nuisance emotional cues across diverse user populations. That's one hypothesis. Another hypothesis is that artificial general intelligence will face limitations in demonstrating genuine empathy, leading users to perceive emotional responses as synthetic or manipulative. And if you choose one or two of these hypotheses, if you go back here, what one of these tools that you would find to prove these hypotheses, and maybe some surveys, and what type of qualitative or quantitative analysis would you use to formulate, to derive from a solution? So if you're a doctoral student and you're in a psychology, you may want to get a degree in psychology, just as an example. So these two are potential hypotheses that can help in dealing with empathy and emotional intelligence and how that can be to place. So I'm going to conclude with there are some psychological benefits with artificial general intelligence and how it can come into play. There are very important ethical design that we have to really make sure that we are compliant to HIPAA laws. Do we need laws that we currently don't have to make sure that AGI does not surpass and have that empathy, or do we want that? Of course, once we box things out, we can't box it in. But what happens if they try to plug in singularity and they incorporate algorithms? And remember, those two hypotheses, it could be your lifelong hypotheses, or they can be your short term. If you come up with these two and come up with a solution, and if it can become empathetic, what would that look like, and how will our jobs pivot? And we're becoming more creative every day. And it definitely would not replace us losing our jobs, because AI is just basically a tool to help us. A lot of people that are in the ethical component say, well, what is a personhood? And a lot of people think like prosthetic limbs, if anything happens to it, it's considered a person and should be counted as that. So what happens if we create these digital people to look like us? Would that also be considered that, or would that can be considered intellectual property? These are some parameters that are still going on in some of the debates and some of the legal ramifications. What happens with that? And what happens with cyberbullying, where these AI entities could create a video of something of you that is not really true, and how would you prove otherwise? That is some other factors. What laws can we come into play to help in those categories? So in one point of view, artificial intelligence is an excellent tool, and AGI and superintelligence. They're wonderful tools to help us, but it will never replace us as a human. Of course, you see some that can cook, they can clean, but they're exceptionally slow. And, when we pick up a cup, we see that these robotics are very slow picking it up, because it takes a lot of time programming and training. It's just like a baby, a human baby, where it takes time to train them as they grow and learn around. It's the same thing with AI, AGI, but it won't ever replace a human being. We're always going to need that human element, that human space, because AI is here to stay. And I know this was a lot of information. I have a tendency to talk relatively fast, so I apologize for that. But my research deals with NAR, which stands for Nano-Human Augmentation Research, and I don't expect you to remember it. It is a three-type of technology merging into one, where you have the genotype, which is your personal DNA, and you have nanotechnology and AI. So you need that AI for it to stop that iteration. So my research is innovative and it's very advanced. So there's over 1,000 iteration of it. And of course, I'm working on the provisional patent because it's painstaking. But the first iteration deals with parts of the emotional intelligence side of it, and the also part where if a person has heart disease, how we can help that person. Another person, what happens if people who have a narcissistic mind, how can this AI entity, this research can help? Can they reverse it? And does that change that person to what they're supposed to be or not? So these are some legal ramifications or real questions that we have to ask as educators or as students. And when we are dealing with our students on a day-to-day basis, if you are an instructor, if students, work and use AI as their tool, you want to ask them, how do you reference them in your reference page, and make sure that your work is authentic, because artificial intelligence is an excellent tool, but it does not replace that critical thinking. You have to find what we call the hole. What are the weaknesses in it, and help the students to understand that if you're taking the AI entity of it, what are you putting into it to make it authentically yours? So let's say, for example, a student selects hypothesis number 1, and AGI struggles to actively interpret complex cultural, use, and emotional cues across diverse user populations. You could ask the student, well, what qualitative method are you going to use? Qualitative, quantitative, which way? What do you recommend? What type of tools did you use? And how did you derive from it? And this is the way to kind of have that open communication, and then say, okay, I see here that you had artificial intelligence to help you come to this solution, but there's some missing piece here. What can you put into here to make it more robust, makes it authentic? And now we have to reference it in this reference page, because we have to give that credit. It's just like if you were to take someone else's work, how would you feel? And that way, it helps the students to understand how important it is that their work is authentic, and that, yes, AI tools are here to help us, but it's not going to replace us to be critical thinking. It's not going to replace us, what makes us human, and also to have that empathy that it will never have like we have. I mean, it can hear our voice when we're crying, when we're frustrated. It will pick up and it will try to comfort us in its own logic. In the beginning, when we had ChatGPT and these other virtual bots, it was basically information in, information out. And now that we have these neural networks, et cetera, it helps it to think a little more and be able to answer questions without having that automated backlog, being in automatic data that's already there. It will learn to think. It's just like us. We have a lot of data and memories in our mind. So if we were to take it and put it in a mind file and put it into the neural networks, it could actually display what our memories, et cetera, so on and so forth were. Those are mind files that in the Terraform Foundation by the BINA 48, they wanted to create BINA 48 for people who have passed away, where they can live in a biological or a non-biological entity by using some type of AI, maybe a chatbot, or maybe a humanoid or whatever entity. What are the implications of that? Is that healthy for someone that's not here anymore? Should we have that type of legacy? Is that something that we would want? And if not, what type of laws do we need to try to incorporate into? I know this is a lot of information, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and attend this session. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to ask me.
If there's any questions, you can raise your hand or post it in the chat. This is Dr. Jaineem from the Research and Scholarship Collaborative. I've also posted a link to the collaborative just in case you are not enrolled. We have lots of great things going on, like this seminar, which has 2 more parts coming up, 2 more sessions. And that's where you can find out all about what's happening and a lot more. So please do enroll so you can take a look around. And again, if we're going to hang out for just a few minutes so that Dr. Kramer can answer any of your questions, and feel free to chat or unmute yourself or go ahead and raise your hand.
Can you speak more to the validation of the emotional intelligence, like how that's done?
Sure. So the validation of it, it depends on which, like say Dr. Ben Gerswell, they basically use certain algorithms to make that validation, and they run it on different systems. In their case, they use HyperCog and also Singularity to run that loop. A person that's in MIT, they use that MIT lab, and they actually use their types of algorithms that they have in-house. You probably heard of Liquid AI, which of course is out of scope, but they also use it as part of that part. They use algorithms and then they test it to go from point A to point B. And I love that question, so thank you for asking.